Look, Doug Naples, just this guy, you know? My first encounter with the work of Doug Naples was way back in 2008, when I read his graphic novel, Iron West. I was semi-familiar with Naples' work, like the Earthworm Jim games and such, but I had never read any of his comics. When I was in my late teens, I was really into westerns. I still am, but I was too. So Iron West was a really cool read. After that, I read his first graphic novel, Gear. It was okay, I guess. I liked it alright when I first read it, but I may need to reevaluate it soon. I remember they used the word retarded a lot, and I didn't like that at all. So there's that. Also, I thought the ending was pretty anticlimactic, so there's that too. And soon after, I read Monster Zoo, because at that time, I heard that Sam Raimi was producing a film adaptation of it. And again, it was just okay. The monster designs were cool and fun to look at, but I didn't care much for the references to the war in Iraq, and the whole dead soldier father thing I thought was pretty generic. And besides, I'm not a fighter, I'm a lover. Now, my first personal encounter with Doug Naples occurred in 2016, when I shared an Instagram photo calling him out as a bigoted, racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic prick. I also attacked his political and religious beliefs as well, which is pretty much just as bad as attacking someone's sexual orientation. Well, needless to say, Mr. Naples was pretty steamed by my hateful remarks, so he lashed out at me on Twitter, as I did share the Instagram photo on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. And many other people came out in support of him. And naturally, being the pushover that I am, I caved and apologized for my remarks. To my colossal astonishment, he forgave me. Because as Jesus said to Peter, I tell you, forgive not 7 times, but 77 times. Anyway, after we both cooled down, he told me that he was coming to Houston to host a talk on animation and graphic novel production. So naturally, I jumped at the opportunity to have him sign my things. When I met him, briefly though I did, he seemed like an alright dude. He was really tall. What does all this have to do with the subject for today? Well, not much. But it's a neat little story anyway. The Neverhood was a point-and-click adventure game released in 1996 for Microsoft Windows computers exclusively. Animated entirely in claymation, it was almost universally acclaimed upon its release, but sold very little. See, 1996 was one of the best years for video games ever. The Nintendo 64 was released that year, along with its best-selling game ever, Super Mario 64. In addition, Resident Evil, Crash Bandicoot, Tekken 2, Twisted Metal 2, Tomb Raider, Duke Nukem 3D, Quake, Command & Conquer, Red Alert, Super Mario RPG, Kirby Superstar, and Diablo were all released that year. I was 6 years old at that time, and I couldn't give a tinker's cuss about some silly point-and-click game. I was too busy begging my parents for a Nintendo 64. But anyway, as you may have guessed, amidst a sea of masterpieces, the Neverhood faded into obscurity. However, it may not have been a commercial hit here in its country of origin, but it was quite a smash in Japan. Big in Japan. Yes, Japan absolutely loved the Neverhood. They loved it enough not only to translate it and release it in their territory as Klaymen Klaymen, but in 1998 they released it on the best-selling video game console of that era, the mighty PlayStation. And believe it or not, I actually have that very game in my collection. I purchased this hidden gem of an import from eBay in 2016, about a month before I met Doug TeNapel himself, and he was kind enough to sign the game for me, bless his heart. I will never, ever, ever get rid of this. If you want to get a copy of this for yourself, well, good luck trying to play it on your silly NTSC-U PlayStation. Those suckers are region locked. You'll need an NTSC-J PlayStation to play this one. Also, I strongly recommend not, I repeat, not playing this one with a controller. It's annoying. If you can, definitely play it with the amazing PlayStation mouse. So, once you have the tools, once you have the talent, you're ready to play. The story of the game is actually pretty sparse. You have a simple point-and-click interface, as you can see, but most of the gameplay revolves around puzzle solving. The viewpoint alternates between third-person Monkey Island-style point-and-clickery and first-person Myst-style adventuring. There's no action screen, no inventory screen, no one to talk to in dialogue trees. Heck, there's not even any people to talk to. Only discs you gather that are scattered around the different locations you go to. Once you gather all of these discs, you are treated to the backstory behind the Neverhood. Narrated by the dim-witted but somewhat lovable Willie Trombone, the story of the Neverhood takes a few cues from the Bible, particularly the story of the creation of Earth and humankind's fall from grace. In this case, God is replaced by a robot wearing a crown named Hoborg, and Satan, the fallen angel, is replaced by Clog, a mischievous jerk who stole Hoborg's crown so he could rule the Neverhood himself.
He used to cut my grass. He was a very nice boy.
If you are worrying that you won't be able to follow any of that, don't. My version of the game may be in Japanese, but it really doesn't matter, because there's very little dialogue in the game, and what little there is all occurs at the end of the game. Also, similar to some LucasArts adventures, there is no way to die in the game. Except for one, and it clearly says so. No joke, it actually says you will die. But you know, who cares? However, moving back into the gameplay, there are a lot of puzzles in the game that are kind of frustrating, and most of the solutions are different with each playthrough, and that is extra annoying to me. And I do love me some dungeon crawlers, but this? This is just ridiculous. But anyway, graphics. As I mentioned previously, the graphics were created entirely in Claymation. All the gameplay, all the cutscenes, every little thing is done with Claymation. However, this being a PlayStation game, the video quality of the full motion video is not the best, and there is quite a bit of loading here and there. Still, one has to admire the craftsmanship that went into this. Claymation is one of the most difficult forms of animation to create ever. I know this because I've worked with Claymation before. And believe me, it is a colossal pain in the neck. It's well worth it in the end, but boy howdy is it a colossal pain in the neck. It's why I have so much respect for animators like Nick Park, Will Vinton, Bruce Bickford, Lee Hardcastle, Robert Benfer, and all the animators who worked on this game. They know the medium, and they're willing to work with it. And the results are nothing short of jaw-dropping. Doug TenNapel got the idea for the Neverhood in 1988, a few years before designing his biggest hit up to that point, Earthworm Jim.
You're the best!
However, dissatisfied with the way things were being done at Shiny Entertainment, the developer of Earthworm Jim, TenNapel and a few disgruntled Shiny employees left to form their own development studio, the Neverhood Incorporated. TenNapel pitched the idea of the Neverhood to DreamWorks Interactive, which had just started. In 1995, DreamWorks Interactive was looking for new and interesting ideas for games, and they thought a claymation game sounded great. So the game went into development, and in 1996 it was released to the public. As I said, it was critically lauded, but commercially it bombed. Because people just weren't playing point-and-click adventure games in 1996. They just weren't. The Neverhood was followed up with a sequel called Skull Monkeys on the PlayStation, which was released in Japan as Klaymen Klaymen 2. However, rather than being a point-and-click adventure like its predecessor, Skull Monkeys was just a simple platformer. The Neverhood also received a sequel exclusively in Japan on the PlayStation called Klaymen Gun Hockey. However, not only was this game neither a point-and-click adventure or platformer, it wasn't even created in claymation. There have been talks for years that a film version of the Neverhood was in the works. However, when I met Doug TenNapel, he confirmed that he wanted to make the movie, but he couldn't get the rights to the game, so he produced a game that was designed in a similar style called Armorkrog. It wasn't as well received as the Neverhood from what I have read. Nowadays, the PC version of the Neverhood goes for an arm and a leg on the second-hand market. And even though there are some who will pay through the nose for such a rarity, I'm perfectly content with Klaymen Klaymen on my shelf. If you have a Japanese PlayStation, if you have a PlayStation mouse, if you are a fan of point-and-click adventure games, if you aren't willing to shell out your life savings when you could just spend $20 and be done with it, Klaymen Klaymen on the PlayStation is the way to go. Well, that about does it for Klaymen Klaymen. This is Space Humor, crossing his fingers for the Overcoat, Wendell and Wild, Carla Castaneda, and Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. Adios.